Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Item number 9. Repeal of Chapter 7.150 of the Fullerton Municipal Code, second reading of ordinance.
Good evening, my name is Diane Hickey. A nation that does not protect its children has no future. That is a quote from California pediatrician Dr. Toril Gelter in her letter to the FCC on inadequate EMF exposure limits. One of the most important duties of any local government is to keep its people safe. The February 7th action by our City Council appears to run contrary to that simple principle. In September 2010, FPD Captain Kevin Hamilton presented and endorsed ordinance number 3149, which was entered into the Fullerton Municipal Code as section 7.150. The recent presentation to repeal the same ordinance and municipal code as given by attorney James Touchstone contained misrepresentations. In public comments, Mr. Levinson pointed out that the Fullerton ordinance specified residency restrictions against only child sex offenders, not all sex offenders. All sex offenders is the language of the laws being challenged in California courts. The residency restriction of only child sex offenders has not yet been adjudicated in any California court. Touchstone took exception to Levinson's comments. He stated as follows: with respect, I must disagree with Mr. Levinson and his comments. Specifically, I'm looking at the language before you right now in our municipal code, and it states that any sex offender is prohibited from residing within 2,000 feet of any school, park, or daycare center. What Touchstone failed to tell the City Council members was the definition of sex offender as defined in Ordinance 7.150.020H. In quote, sex offender means any person required by law to register with government entity as a sex offender for an offense against or involving a child or children, including but not limited to the California Sex Offender Registration Act, Penal Code 290. The City Council asked very few questions of Mr. Touchstone and did not seem to care that the presentation contained misrepresentations. They did not appear to want to take the time to make sure they had the facts on a complicated issue as it relates to the already issued court cases here in the state of California. Fullerton children are counting on us for their safety and protection. Will you vote to ensure the protection of Fullerton children? Thank you.
Just 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Thank you. City of Fullerton and the FPD leadership seem to have coordinated in an effort to get out this incorrect message concerning the repeal of this Fullerton ordinance in section 7.150 of the Fullerton Municipal Code. Parents throughout the Fullerton School District received a very misleading message from them by recorded phone text message or email as follows. The Fullerton School District is aware of the repeal by the Fullerton City Council of municipal codes regarding sex offender residency and other similar restrictions. The District Superintendent, Robert Pleka, has been in discussion with and will continue to work with the Fullerton Interim City Manager on the implication of this change in City Code. Meanwhile, please be aware that the state law remains in place, which include residency restrictions prohibiting sex offenders from living within 2,000 feet of any public or private school or park where children regularly gather. There is no change in enforcement of these laws, end quote from Pletka. As a Laguna Road parent, Mr. Levinson explained to the school's PTA the following, that the above message was very misleading and the assurance given that state law remains in place, which includes residency restrictions, is not an accurate and complete description of reality in Fullerton after the actions just taken by our City Council in their 5-0 vote to repeal and remove our child sex offender ordinance. The state law, which they are referring to, Prop 83, known as Jessica's Law, passed with over 70% of the people of California voting for it in November of 2006. However, it was the lack of penalties attached to this state law which caused his wife Susan and himself to spearhead the Fullerton ordinance. Except for certain parolees and those on probation, both temporary situations, no convicted sex offender could be arrested for violating the above residency restriction under Prop 83. And this fact was explained to a group of parents by the FPD Captain Hampton back in early 2010. Now, 7 years later, the FPD has issued their own written statement on the City of Fullerton website with a false assurance to the public that we are covered by Jessica's law. That law doesn't cover us as intended, and the FPD knows that. Did the department that informed Mr. Levinson and his neighbors of that fatal flaw of the law back in 2010 suddenly have amnesia? That's the end of Mr. Levinson's quotation. First of all, I read the Register article, and I guess Ms. Fitzgerald had extreme displeasure in voting to repeal this. Well, my question is, why did you do it? Second question I have is why the Fullerton Police Department deferred me to the state corrections officers in seeking clarity to the teeth that are supposedly in the existing legislation that supposedly protects children that everybody here seems to be fine with. You spent more time splitting hairs over a $10,000 grant application or some other nonsense than over these children. Let me tell you something. I take it to heart. Children are important to me. I've got 4 of my own. And for you folks to sit up here and quick kick this thing, I mean, we've got a city attorney up here who's making probably $500,000 a year. What good is the guy if he's not going to stand up for the kids? We got some convicted sex offender that wants to run around and threaten to sue everybody, so we throw all our protections out the window, and then we put out these false sense of assurance to the community. That's a bunch of baloney.
Good evening, Barry Levinson. I'll continue. The article written under the FPD section of the city website, entitled Behind the Badge by Lou Ponzi, is as follows, quote, "The Fullerton City Council this week repealed a section of the city's municipal code section pertaining to residency restrictions for sex offenders. Pending litigation has found the municipal code to be unconstitutional," end quote. I was not aware that Mr. Lou Ponzi, writing this article for the FPD, has the power to speak for the California judiciary when the specifics of the Fullerton ordinance to limit the law to only child sex offenders has not yet been specifically addressed or adjudicated in the California courts, period. Needless to say, I have to point out the outrageousness of Mr. Ponzi's assertion here representing the FPD. He continues, quote, "The Fullerton Police Department wants residents to know that a state law that establishes residency restriction and prohibits sex offenders from residing within 2,000 feet of any public or private school or park where children regularly gather remains firmly in place," end quote. This is from the FPD website. How terrible that they would put this in place when they know what they're saying is not accurate. Yes, firmly in place, but with no authority to uphold the law due to a total lack of penalties for violating the residency restrictions for any convicted child sex offenders who are no longer on parole or probation, which are a very small number of sex offenders who are on probation or on parole. The vast majority we have no protections against. This law that my wife and I helped pass was very well thought out law whose specific residency restriction against only child sex offenders has not yet been adjudicated in any California court. If you vote to affirm the repeal of Fullerton Municipal Code 7.150, you would be making a clear statement that pedophiles are more important than our children. If you do not want to be labeled forever as a protector of pedophiles over the legitimate safety concerns of parents, you must change course here tonight. There is no current court decision that is forcing the city to take this action tonight or next month or even next year. You as a council are doing this of your own free will and will be held accountable. You still have an opportunity tonight to do reverse course and do the right thing for children and parents alike throughout Fullerton. Thank you.
Thank you.